Hey there and welcome back to NBA 2K17. My name is Pete and today we complete the first year of NBA 2K17's in MyGM mode with the Boston Celtics. Now, quick disclaimer, this video is not meant to be a step-by-step guideline on how to handle the Celtics in MyGM. Consider it more of an assortment of tips and ideas on how to get started. If you have never played with the Celtics and are pretty much unfamiliar with their personnel, this video might be useful for you. With that being said, let's dive right in. Here are 3 moves to make in NBA 2K17 MyGM mode as the Boston Celtics. First up, let's have a look at the situation in Boston. The Celtics have a nice core of good players in or around their prime, and when I say core I mean an entire starting 5 of them. With Isaiah Thomas, Avery Bradley, Jay Crowder, Amir Johnson and the newly acquired Al Horford, the Celtics have one of the best starting lineups in the East. We can add to that a number of solid backups with Kelly Olynyk, Marcus Smart, Gerald Green and Jonas Jerebko, as well as a promising rookie with a very good rating in Jaylen Brown. Contract-wise, 4 out of 5 players in the starting lineup are locked down for the next 2 seasons, with contracts that allow flexibility. Only Al Horford really has a big contract, and especially the contracts of Thomas, Bradley and Crowder can be considered steals. There are, however, a total of 4 contracts expiring, namely the ones for Johnson, Olynyk, Green and Jerebko. While that does not directly affect your core, it could still have consequences on the depth of your bench. We want to keep in mind that only Kelly Olynyk can be extended, the other 3 guys will become unrestricted free agents after the season. That is the player side of the situation dealt with, however there are still 2 things to talk about. Number 1 is the fact that Boston has 4 draft picks in the upcoming draft, 3 second rounders and the first rounder from Brooklyn. That is a high number of assets that can potentially be used to sweeten trade offers. Speaking of those sweeteners, the other thing is that Boston still has a bit of cap space. That means should we opt for a trade, we can potentially pick up a bit more salary, so that's some added flexibility here. All in all, as it stands at the beginning of the season, Boston has one of the better teams in the league with a great core, many solid pieces, draft picks galore and some cash to play around with. A nice situation indeed, but there are still a few things to improve, so let's get to it. Here are your 3 key questions heading into year 1 with the Celtics. Number 1. What to do with Amir Johnson? He is, not by far, but still noticeably the weakest part of the starting 5. Yes, a 76 player rating is absolutely okay, but he's also 29 years old, so there's not much room for him to get any better. Additionally, he will become a free agent after the season, with no way to extend him before that. That makes him one of the core pieces of this video, both because his position can be upgraded, and also because he's an expiring contract with high trade value. The risk of having a walk away is there, but it's not huge. You could always fill the hole by making Kelly Olynyk a starter either at the power forward or the center, so the risk is very much controlled, but you probably still don't want him to walk away for nothing. Question number 2 concerns the shooting guard position, specifically the backup. With Avery Bradley we have a great starter here, we don't have to worry about that. But his current backup is a 30-year-old Gerald Green with a player rating of 73, tendency decreasing. Now Jaylen Brown is good and can play both the shooting guard and the small forward position, but only one solid backup for both of these positions is probably not enough. And then lastly, question number 3, and that is, do you put your first round draft pick on the line in a possible trade to land a big piece, or do you try to find one in the draft? This decision largely needs to be made based on what's available in your draft class. If you have several 80+ overall rookies at positions that you need, you might want to hold on to that pick. On the other hand, if the draft class is rather weak or the top players are at positions that you don't need, throwing it into a trade might be the better option. And speaking of trades, let's get started. Here are your 3 moves to make. Number 1. Trade Jonas Jerebko and Gerald Green for a backup shooting guard. Now you can either make this move at the very beginning of the season or at the trade deadline. The beginning of the season has the advantage that the player you acquire has a maximum time to fit into the rotation. Of course, doing a trade will result in a hit to your team chemistry, so doing it midway through the season might not be the best idea. However, you will basically make a 2-for-1 trade here, even if you get a player in addition to the shooting guard, so on paper your team might look a bit worse, and if you simulate your seasons I can understand that you want to avoid that for as long as possible. Now for the trade itself, here are why Jerebko and Green are solid trade pieces for you. We spoke about Green and his less than ideal role as the backup shooting guard before. In addition to that, both Jerebko and Green are expiring. You can't extend them, so you risk losing them anyway. And with player ratings in the mid-70s and manageable contracts, they are still interesting enough for the other teams. Now, by trading Jerebko, you will lose your assigned backup power forward. However, that is not as much of a problem as it seems. Johnson, Olynyk, Horford and Mickey can all play the position, and that still leaves Zeller as a backup center, who with Jerebko on the roster will probably struggle to make the rotation. So you see, you can easily carve out a nice 4 to 5 man rotation down low, even with Jerebko gone. Now, what you're looking for at the shooting guard is a player with a rating of 75 or better. Keep in mind that this player will likely play next to Marcus Smart in the bench lineup, so some shooting skills should be desirable. To get the player you want, you can always throw in a second rounder of your choice, preferably though the one from the Cavs, as that one will likely fall the lowest. Now let's talk trade targets. You can go after a variety of players here. Options include Josh Richardson from the Heat, Norman Powell from the Raptors, or Jeremy Lamb from the Hornets. Of course, you are not limited to those, and depending on the GM badges you have, you might even get someone better. Here is the trade I settled with: Jerebko, Green and the Cleveland second rounder for Josh Richardson and Udonis Haslem. Richardson, with a 75 rating at 22 years old, is a nice looking prospect. He is an incredible sharpshooter with a team option at the end of his contract and will then become a restricted free agent afterwards. With Haslem, we coincidentally picked up some depth at the power forward position, although he will likely not make the rotation, and at 36 years old you'll want to and have to let him walk into free agency after the season. Now, there is an alternative option to this move, and that one depends largely on your draft class. If it's going to be a strong draft, consider flipping both Jerebko and Green for draft picks and sign Lance Stephenson. Now, I know the Pelicans signed him, but somehow this move has not made it into 2K, at least not at the point of this video. So at 26 years old and a 74 rating, and most importantly thanks to this being a video game, none of the issues that real-life Lance Stephenson might bring with him, this can be a good move. Now, both the number and quality of draft picks you get for both Jerebko and Green might vary, but I'm pretty sure with 3 second rounders you can package something together and move up into the mid-late first round. Now, to bring an end to this move, my personal recommendation would be to do it ASAP. Do not wait a single game. Injuries can always screw up your trade plans, and I would rather take the hit to team chemistry now and build it up over the season, instead of having a dip midway through the season when the games start to become more and more important. And that same logic applies to move number 2, and that would be to trade Amir Johnson for a long-term option at either the power forward or the center spot. Now, thanks to Al Horford and Kelly Olynyk, you have a bit of flexibility here. Both of them are labeled as centers, but can very well play the power forward position, and you still have Zeller as a backup center. In this trade, we are looking for a player with an 80 overall rating, or someone who can quickly develop into that range. Depending on the strength of your draft class, you might want to throw in your first rounder. If you manage to acquire an additional one in the alternate option to move 1, then congratulations, this might just make the decision a lot easier. Otherwise, feel free to add second rounders or low-level rotation players to the trade. Your options without the first rounder will likely include guys like Biyombo or Mahimi, while with the first rounder you can move up to the level of Jonas Valanciunas or Steven Adams. Whether you involve your first or not is entirely your choice, but keep in mind that Boston is likely more in win now than in rebuild mode, and with the core you currently have, you will likely not have the time to grow a superstar from a draft. Unless of course he already is, but that is pretty rare. Now, the trade I finally went with was the one for Rudy Gobert. I think that is not entirely out of the realm of possibility. My draft class had 3 excellent centers in the top 10, and with their own first rounder in addition to the one I gave them, I think the Jazz would have been able to grab at least 1 if not 2 of them. The upsides of Rudy Gobert are quickly explained. He's a young but very long and very talented big man. He only has 1 year on his contract, but in contrast to Amir Johnson, he will become an unrestricted free agent, so there's much more security there. After those trades were made, the lineup of the Celtics looked like this, a starting 5 made up of entirely 80+ players. And for those of you who think moving Horford to the power forward is bad, actually, if we look at his ratings as a power forward here, they are across the board slightly better than as a center. To complete a very solid 10-man rotation, we have off the bench Smart, Richardson and Brown. That is a backcourt with a lot of potential and one that could start together in 2 or 3 years. And then Olynyk and Zeller as the backup big man. Once again, we profit from Olynyk's versatility here. Now for our third and last move. We want to fast forward slightly around the middle of December and then give a 3-year contract extension to Kelly Olynyk. This is mostly a no-brainer. Olynyk can play both frontcourt positions, he's even good enough to start should someone get injured, and he should not be too expensive. If you traded for Gobert, he might be willing to re-sign here, but for me he very quickly decided to test free agency. And that's it. Those were my 3 ideas for moves to make as the Boston Celtics in NBA 2K17's MyGM mode. I had solid success with this. In my season, the Celtics had a rocky start thanks to the bad chemistry after 2 trades in the beginning of the season, but they got it together and finished the season with 48 wins, exactly the same amount the Celtics had last year. As a 4th seed, they swept Indiana in the first round of the playoffs, but then got eliminated by Cleveland after 6 games. Now after the season you'll want to accept most, if not all of the team options, and depending on how you made your moves, that should leave you with at least 12 serviceable players under contract for the next season. If you have cap space, you can throw it at free agents and see if you can upgrade the team further, and if you did what I did and traded for Rudy Gobert, now is the time to hope nobody throws an offer at him. Something that might be worth considering is to sign him to a longer contract instead of the 1-year qualifying offer, because if the qualifying offer is accepted, you cannot extend him and he will become an unrestricted free agent after 1 year. All of that, however, are moves to make in the off-season, well after the bulk of year 1 has passed, and by that time you should already know what you want from your team and your players going forward. So I hope you liked this quick rundown of the options you have in year 1 as the Celtics. Let me know in the comments below how you would handle the Celtics in MyGM. As always, leave a like or subscribe to the channel if you like what I'm doing. And I can say thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.